Hello, this is Marco Machido from Siama Systems, and today I'm going to show you how to play back a packet capture using the PROVA. So what I did was I started up my Wireshark, and I simply captured some packets from my MacBook Ethernet adapter. So started up Wireshark here and just captured 64 packets off my Ethernet adapter, and I saved this file as a pcap.ng file on my desktop. So it's named demo capture file. Now what I want to do is I want to load that file onto the PROVA and play it from a port. How do I go about doing that? Well, the first thing you got to keep in mind is that the port you want to play it back from has to be in Jenna mode. So for this demo, I'll be using port 1 to play back the file. So I go to port, mode, and I make sure port 1 is in Jenna mode. Great. Now, I have port 1 physically connected through a fiber to port 2, just so I can play back those frames and capture them on port 2. So how do I go ahead and load this up? Well, the first thing you need to do is you need to create a buffer. So creating a buffer instance is pretty simple. You go to port capture and press the plus button here on the lower side of the screen, and by default you'll create a buffer instance called buffer1 with 1 gig of depth. Now if you recall, the PROVA has a total of 8 gigabytes of buffer heap. You can divide that any way you want amongst multiple buffer instances, and you simply click on the size field, and for example I can make buffer 2 gigs, so on and so forth, and I can assign it to different ports. That's up to you. In our case, we're going to keep it simple here. Use the default 1 gig. That's plenty of size for our pcap.ng file, and I'm going to assign this to port 1. Now, how do I get that pcap.ng file into this buffer? Well, simply click on the import buffer button, and I want to draw your attention to something here. So I'm going to get that capture file that's on my desktop. I called it demo capture. There it is. I want to draw your attention to the statistics associated with this buffer. You see that they're all 0. Now I'm going to import the file, and boom, you can see that now that buffer contains 64 packets for a total of 18,471 bytes. Okay, now that the buffer is loaded up, we want to play it back. So you go to the upper right hand part of the screen where it says playback control, and you turn the state to enabled. So that'll allow port 1 to play back buffer 1. Okay. Now you have a couple of options here. You have the source. We want to keep it as the buffer. There's something called pair port. I'm going to show you how to use that in another video. But you're going to keep it for add buffer for this to play back that pcap.ng file. And the packet spacing, well, you can choose to preserve it, or you can choose to play it back at line rate. So when we Wireshark captured those packets from my Ethernet adapter on my Mac, it timestamps it, so it gives it an inter-packet gap that we can respect by keeping this parameter at preserve, or we can play it back. We can ignore those and play them back at line rate, so with the minimum inter-packet gap. So then the stop mode, you can play it back once or continuously. I'll show you a couple of these things after. And of course we have the buffer associated with the port. So if I go back home here, I can actually press play, and it should play back that buffer from port 1 to port 2. So let's see if those 64 frames come out and back to port 2. And you can see here, yes, indeed they do. So it's a total of 18,471 bytes, 64 packets. Great. Let's go back to port capture. Now you saw how slowly it played it back. That's because that was the actual inter-packet gaps that were captured by Wireshark. Now if I want to ignore those and play it back as fast as possible, meaning at line rate, I simply change the packet spacing to line rate, and now I can go back home. This time, instead of going back home by clicking, I'm going to start a new tab, right? I'll go back with a new tab and just make things easier. I cleared my statistics. Now watch how quickly it plays it back. Boom, in a blink of an eye, all 64 packets have been transmitted. I can also play them back continuously. See, and it's playing them back at line rate, and it's playing them continuously. If I wanted to specify, play it back only, I don't know, 1,000 packets, or for example, play it back, but play it back for 10 seconds. You can actually set this parameter to time and specify the number of seconds, and then it'll play. You can count to 10. And then the playback stops. It's pretty simple. So I hope that helps. If you have any questions, feel free to email us at support@siamasystems.com.